Ali Abdaal is a productivity YouTuber
There is one single habit that's most changed my life. That habit is journaling.
who has nearly 5 million subscribers. He has built a successful YouTube channel talking about how to do things optimally and how to get the most out of yourself. But does that apply to learning music and learning the piano? Well, Ali did a video on how he learned to play the piano and sing. So let's get into it.
Today we're doing something a little bit different than usual, and I'm going to be taking you through the 10 levels of being able to play the piano and sing at the same time. So you can go from a total beginner to being able to sing something like this. If we go Perfect by Ed Sheeran, it goes something like this. Baby, I'm dancing in the dark with you between my arms, barefoot on the cross, listening to our favorite song, and so on. And this is all just me not really knowing how to play the piano, but just following a series of mathematical formulae across these 10 different levels, which I'm going to teach you in this video.
I see people make videos kind of like this quite often, where they're talking about hacks or mathematical formulas in order to be able to learn piano without really knowing the piano. And that is just not a thing. What they're really talking about is music theory and understanding how chords work.
And play it like this.
That is just regular old music theory. Music theory is just about understanding patterns and how music is written. So of course, if you understand how to build a chord, then you can build any chord, and therefore you can play any song that's made up of chords, which is every song.
And I think when it comes to playing piano, especially playing piano and like singing and stuff, it can sound and it looks a lot more intimidating and difficult than it actually is. And as I'll hopefully show you in this video, by just following a few formulae and by using a cool website and by doing a little bit of practice, you too can get to the point where people will think that you've been playing the piano for years.
It really depends what you want to do with the piano. Obviously, if you want to be a concert pianist, then it's not just a case of following a formula and then being able to play whatever you want. Or if you want to be able to improvise and play jazz solos, then obviously that's not the case either. But for the purposes that Ali is talking about, which I assume is someone who is not really interested in doing music really seriously, just as a hobby, and they want to sing along with it, then sure, you can do a lot with just a few chords.
All right, let's get started with level 1, and that is where we're going to go on a website called Ultimate Guitar Tabs, and we're going to type in the name of the song we want to do, for example, Perfect by Ed Sheeran, and we're going to find a series of chords that have a decent rating. So this one has 33,000 reviews, which is pretty good. We're going to click on that, and now this will tell you the exact chords of the song that you want to play.
I mean, this is the website that you usually end up on if you are looking for a set of chords for something. It's one of those websites where users can submit chord patterns for songs, so therefore it's not always 100% reliable. But as Ali said, if you pick the one that's highest rated, then you're going to get something that's usually not too far off.
The main thing as well is that for the purposes of this video, we're going to be playing in the key of C major. Don't worry if you don't know what that means, but basically you want to use the transpose button on this website.
I'll tell you what that means. That means on the piano, you're only going to be playing the white notes. C major means there are no sharps or flats, so the scale of C major is just C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then you're back to another C. In Western music, it's essentially the first scale and key that you learn because it is so visually simple, where you're not having to worry about black notes.
So the first note is a C. So I'm going to go all the way down. Now my first note is a C, and that means the only notes I'm allowed to play for the rest of this song are the white notes.
That is not always the case. Sometimes songs don't start on the chord of the name of the key. So just because it starts on a C doesn't mean that you're going to be in the key of C major, and therefore you might not need to just play the white notes, and it can become a little bit more complicated. But with most simple pop songs, it does tend to do that, so it's a good rule of thumb. It's just not always the case.
Stuff about keys and, you know, different majors and minors and all that kind of stuff, we don't really need to worry about it just yet. I might do some videos about that in the future if you guys are interested. But we're going to ignore music theory for now and just focus on the things you actually have to know to be able to play the song.
Once again, is separating the idea of music theory with teaching chords, and chords is music theory. There's no separation there. Saying
that we're going to ignore music theory for now and just focus on the things you actually have to know to be able to play the song
is the same as saying we're going to forget about music theory, but I'm going to give you a little bit of music theory. It makes absolutely zero sense. I've had students say to me before, I really hate music theory, I just want to learn the simple chords.
I'm not enjoying it. I'm not. I hate it!
When really what they mean is that they just want to learn about things that they can actually practically use, but it's not a separate thing.
Basically what we have now is we have all of the chords for the song. We can see I found a love is a C, and then for me it says it's AM, which is A minor. Darling, just dive right in, which is an F, and follow my lead. And so level 1 of playing the piano and singing at the same time is where you're singing the song, but you're playing just the single note while you're singing, and Ultimate Guitar Tabs is telling you what that note is.
Now I understand the logic that he's applying here. He's taking the root note of the chord, so the note of the name of the chord, and he's playing it while singing. What I would recommend doing is doing this in the bass, so doing it with your left hand and lower down, because that's more realistic to what you're going to hear and what you're going to play eventually. So I would play the notes down here somewhere. That way, in the next step, you're just going to be adding to it.
So that's level 1. Let's move on to level 2. And level 2 is where we get very slightly fancier by playing the octave. So on a piano, we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So C and C. This is the same note. They're just an octave apart. And a piano just has these notes repeated. C, 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 C. It's all the same note, just an octave apart. And so now, instead of just playing one note, we're going to play an octave. And we can play it with our left hand, or we can play it with our right hand. I prefer playing the octave with the left.
Once again, he says he prefers playing the octave with the left hand, but you're going to have to do that anyway when you add chords on top of it. So it is better to just take the single bass note that you've just done by playing single notes and just playing two of them at the same time. So C and C, A and A, F and F, G and G. So now, instead of playing one bass note, you're playing two bass notes.
Quite straightforward. All right, level 3 is where it starts to get really interesting, and now we are playing chords with our right hand. And so, when it tells you on Ultimate Guitar what the chord is, like C or A minor or F or G, you want to play that chord. And you can always Google how to play these chords on the piano, but essentially, the key of C major is very nice, because basically it's always the same shape. It's play the note, skip a note, play a note, skip a note, and play a note.
Yeah, so this is called a root position triad, where you play every other note and there's 3 notes. And in a scale, you can play one of these triads starting on every note in the scale. So in C major, you've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B before you get back to another C. So you can play a triad starting on each of those notes. And then at the very top, you get another C major chord again.
It's a very distinctive sound that it makes up the basis of a lot of music. So this is called a major triad.
You can actually rearrange these triads so that you play them anywhere on the piano. So for example, a C major triad is just the notes C, E, and G. But as long as you are playing a C, an E, and a G anywhere on the piano, it's still a C major chord. So you could play C, E, G, and that's still a C major chord. So when you come to actually playing the chords for the song that you want to play, you can just rearrange the notes however you like the sound best.
And so this is the C major triad. It's a C, skip a note, E, skip a note, G. Now you have a triad. Okay, so that's easy. This is the C triad. What is the G triad? Well, you hit a G, skip a note, B, skip a note, D. G major triad. A minor is a bit different. Minor chords tend to sound sad. This sounds a bit more sad.
Yeah, so an easy way of knowing which chords are major and which chords are minor in a scale is chords 1, 4, and 5 are major and everything else is minor. So in the key of C major, C is note 1, so chord 1 is major. Chord 4, which is based on F because that's note 4, is major, and 5 is G, and that's major. Everything else is minor, so chord 2, 3, 6, and 7 are all minor chords. Chord 7 is a bit of an odd one because it's something called a diminished chord, but it's kind of derived from a minor chord. So it's still got that kind of sad, darker tone to it.
Again, we don't need to worry about what a minor chord is. In the key of C, it's, again, just play the A, skip a note, play the C, skip a note, play the E. And so your hand can be in this claw-like position, C, A minor, F, G.
Once again, this only works for C major because it's the only one with all the white keys. As soon as you start getting black notes, that does interfere with the pattern slightly.
And now we're going to sing along over the top once we've done a little bit of practice with this. So here's how it might sound like. I found a girl, beautiful and sweet, and I never knew you were that someone waiting for me. 'Cause we were just kids when we fell in love, not knowing what. Oops. We were just kids when we fell in love. Again, we're skipping a load of stuff about music theory, but I'm trying to take you through these 10 levels as quickly as possible so that you can find out more about these different bits depending on which level you're at.
I do think it's really valuable to actually learn why these things are like they are. Just saying this is a triad and this is how you play this song is only going to give people a way of playing a really basic version of a song, but stopping them from being able to work it out and do it on their own. Why would they ever need to understand why there is a difference between a major chord and a minor chord? And contrary to popular belief, these things are actually not that difficult to understand. But because people are forever finding shortcuts, they never really realise that they're only one tiny step away from being able to understand and play anything properly.
The right hand triads, but we're going to add some rhythm to it. So you're basically going to want to play them on the beat of the song. For example, baby, I'm dancing in the dark with you between my arms. And the chorus is like twice as fast as the verses.
So this inherently relies on someone's ability to feel the pulse of a song. This particular song is in something called 6/8, which means there's 6 beats in a bar. So when he's playing, he's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And a lot of people will do that naturally just by being able to feel the song, but not everyone. And just knowing that there are 6 beats in a bar allows you to do a lot more with the song. For example, you can do different rhythms that fit into 6 beats like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you say to someone, just play to the beat of the song, they may not know what that means, and then they may not be able to go any further with music and think music theory is really terrible, when all they really need to know is that this song has 6 beats per chord, and therefore you can do whatever you want with it as long as it fits into 6s.
So literally, following a mathematical formula.
It's regular music theory, it's not maths.
The beat of the song is going to change depending on what song you're singing. So if we did... I'm holding on your rope, got me 10 feet off the ground.
With this particular song, it has 4 beats in a bar, which is the most common. So once again, just knowing that piece of information, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And play however you want, as long as it fits within those 4 counts.
All right, level 5 is where we start to get really interesting, and now we're going to put our 2 hands together. Now, remember how earlier in level 2, we played the octave. So this is the C octave, A octave, F octave, G octave. Now we're going to combine the octave in the left hand with the triad in the right hand. My hand is staying in exactly the same position. C, A minor, F, G. And now if I were doing my rhythm thing, I could do that as well. I found a love to carry more than just my secrets. So you'll notice that I'm rhythming it with just my right hand.
So I think by the time you get to this, where you're able to play rhythmically with the right hand, you're able to play octaves in the left hand, and you're able to sing with it, you are probably past the point where you should be able to understand why and what you're doing.
Hand, it's a bit much if you rhythm it with both. So I'm just playing the octave, holding the octave with the left hand, and rhythming with the right hand. So that is level 5. Moving on to level 6 now. This is getting really fun. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to play an arpeggio with the right hand. Now, this is a triad, a C major triad made up of C, E, and G. And when we play the chord, we play them together. But now we're going to play them separately. And you can do this with all the chords. So this is C, going to A minor, going to F, going to G.
Notice how that each of the chords has 3 notes, and therefore it's easy to fit into a group of 6 beats in a bar. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. However, if you applied this same logic to the other song that he did that had 4 beats in a bar, 3 notes would not fit so easily into that. So you would have to do something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you were to take what you've learned from Ali's video and try and apply it to your own song without the knowledge of how many beats there are per chord, you probably won't be able to do that on your own.
This is already getting us to the level where, you know, if someone looked at you playing the piano, playing on level 6 or 5 or whichever level we're on, they would think, damn,
This person is reasonably okay at playing the piano. So moving on to level 7, now we're going to be arpeggiating the left hand as well. Now this is where it gets fun. Now, when we're playing an octave in C major, you want to look at where your index finger naturally ends up. For example, if I'm playing a C octave, my index finger ends up on a G. The other way of thinking about this is that if you were to play a C major triad, what would the last note of that triad be? And the answer is a G. And so when you're playing with the octave with the left hand, at this level, we're now going to add in the fifth. So we're going to add in the G as a note that we're allowed to play.
Yeah, so the second explanation there is obviously much better than the first one. The whole point of music theory is to sort of foolproof the playing for anyone. So if he had stuck to just play the note where your index finger naturally sits, then obviously people with massive spade hands like me or tiny hands like Donald Trump might have very different notes that it lands on. Whereas second explanation, which was to play the last note in the chord in the middle of that octave, is the better explanation. Because whether you have massive hands like mine or you have Trump syndrome, then you're going to be able to play the right note.
A minor, I'm hitting an E. F, I'm hitting a C. And G, I'm hitting a D. If you haven't done music before, this will seem like hard, but with a little bit of practice, this becomes very second nature because it's just where your index finger ends up landing.
This is kind of the problem because it's slightly too difficult for someone that's never played music before, but it's also lacking a lot of the information needed for someone who is genuinely learning music.
So let's say I was playing a C, I could play it like this, where it's just the octave, but I could occasionally hit a G, and this would sound pretty legit. So I'll show you what this sounds like when I'm singing, where I'm just occasionally hitting that note.
It goes back to the thing that I said earlier, which is if you play a C major triad, the notes are C, E, and G, and it doesn't really matter where you play them on the piano, as long as it's a C, an E, and a G. So by adding that note into the middle, you're still playing a C major triad with all of the notes together. You're just changing the kind of texture of the chord, and you're giving yourself the opportunity to mess around with more notes. The only notes that I played there were C, E, and G, and it was just one big C major chord.
She shares my dreams, I hope that someday we'll share her home. I found love.
So that would be where I'm playing the triad, playing the octave with the left hand, and occasionally hitting the middle note, the fifth of the left hand chord. Let's now move on to level 8. All right, guys, we're nearly at the end. Level 8 is now where we're going to arpeggiate and alternate and spam the notes of the left hand. And I'm going to spam this on the left hand by like randomly. Yeah, just like in whatever order I want, basically. So here's how it might go if I'm singing along at the same time.
Girl, beautiful and sweet, I never knew you were that someone waiting for me, 'cause we were just kids when we...
Sounds pretty reasonable. Let's now move on to level 9. All right, level 9 is now where we start to get really fancy and we spam the notes of the chord that we're allowed to do with our right hand and also our left hand. Now this is where it starts to get really fun because you can do funky things with it. So we know what the triad is, we know what the octave is with the fifth, and we're going to randomly spam those notes in a way that sounds reasonably aesthetic.
Randomly spam those notes in a way that reasonably sounds aesthetic. I don't know what that means, but for someone who is following along that's never played music before and they're just wanting to learn how to play some songs, I know for absolute sure that they're not going to be able to do that without being instructed on how, or have it broken down sufficiently enough that they're able to practice like component parts and build up the technique.
So here is what that might sound like.
Well, I found a love for me, darling, just dive right in.
You see, I'm just spamming random notes, and with a bit of practice.
He says he's spamming random notes, but he's actually not spamming random notes. He's still playing groups of 6 in both hands, and for the most part his hands are relatively relaxed, which means he's obviously practiced playing chords like this quite a bit in the past. But once again, for someone who is actually at the level where they're able to play like this, you're just missing so much information that they're going to need. And for someone who is following along from level 1, hoping that they're going to click on this video and then be able to play whatever song they want, it's just going to be very difficult for them, and it's probably going to make them think, I am really terrible at music and don't know what I'm doing, and then never attempt to play the instrument again.
One way of making it sound a bit more reasonable is not going super ham on the spamming of the notes. So for example,
as we were just kids when we fell in love, not knowing what it was.
And then you can go really ham on the chorus. So baby, I'm
dancing in the dark with you between my arms.
So I'm going much more ham on the chorus.
There's a massive leap in how he's explaining things now, so he's referring to things as spamming or playing ham. Because at this point, without the relevant understanding of what's going on in the song, you're just relying on people's inherent ability to feel these things. Most people who are able to listen to a song and feel the music to the point where they can play it and replicate it like that are able to do that because they've sat and practiced messing around with chords and listening to songs. And those people are already going to be able to do this. Everyone else who is watching this video in hopes that they're going to learn something is just going to feel terrible about the fact that they can't do it. Because spamming notes and playing ham doesn't really mean anything. He's alluding to concepts that make sense. So for example, in the chorus, you're going to want to build the song because that's usually the big part in a song. But how do you actually do that? How do you actually build the song? What do you do with the rhythm? What do you do with the notes? What do you do with where you play it on the piano in order to do that? These are all things that you can legitimately learn and practice into your playing, as long as it's explained to you why you might want to play in a certain way and how that has an effect on how it sounds on the piano, and then build up the technique and the relaxation into your hands so that you're able to do that by yourself without having to think about it very much. But just saying we're going to spam the keys around these notes that I've just told you without any concept of timing, it's just not going to help anyone learn the piano.
And if you can do this with a bit of practice, this will look like you really know what you're doing when playing the piano. Let's now move on to level 10, where we put it all together with inversions. All right, level 10 is now where we talk about inversions. Now this is slightly fancier.
And this is still music theory.
Let's take a C major chord, which we know is C, E, G. And we know that because a keyboard only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes that we're allowed to play, and then like we can ignore the black notes. And then everything repeats. So
why can you ignore the black notes?
Playing a C, an E, and a G is the same whether you play it there, or up there, or up there, or up there, or down here. It's all the same chord. But crucially, you don't have to start on the official note of the chord. If you want to play a C major chord, you don't have to start with a C and then go up. You can start with a C and then go down to the notes that you're interested in. So C, G, E. This is still a C major chord. It's just a different inversion of it. So the C is the final note rather than the first note. This is one way of doing it. This is one way of doing it. And what you can do is you can kind of memorize the different inversions. Very easy to do in the key of C major because it's all the same kind of hand shape. The other way of doing it is where the C is the middle note of the chord. So we know that a C major chord has C, E, G, but we don't have to play those ones. We can play C, E, and the G underneath.
I'll give you an extra bit of information here for the people that are interested. But if you play a C major chord and you want to get to any other chord in the scale, you can do that by just moving each of the keys at most by one note. So for example, if I want to get from a C chord to a G chord has the notes G, B, and D. Well, you can get to a G, a B, and a D from a C chord with much less movement if you go to B, D, G, because all you've done is move the C and the E down one, but you've still ended up with the G chord because it's the same notes as what you would play here. And this is a much more pleasing way of playing it to the ear because of something called voice leading. And voice leading just means you're moving the notes as little as possible. If you are jumping around a lot on the piano, it's less pleasing to listen to because you can't follow where the notes are going. Whereas if you're only moving them by step, then you can hear them dropping or rising and it sounds much more pleasing to the ear. So if you do find a series of chords, write out the notes that are in that chord. So for example, G, B, and D. And then find those same notes, but find them in as close a place as possible to the chord you've just played. And it will always sound much more pianistic. Rather than... The first one is a little bit less jarring.
Now, why is this important? Well, you might have noticed that when we're playing levels 1 to 9, our hand has to move around a lot around the keyboard. So it's like C, and then you're jumping up to an A minor, or C, jumping down to an A minor, and then maybe jumping up to an F, and then jumping down to a D, a G. It's a lot of moving around, and stuff just generally sounds better when your fingers are moving around less. So for example, if I was playing a C major chord like this, and I knew the next one was an A minor, instead of moving my whole hand up to an A minor, what I could do is I could play the A minor inversion, which looks like that, and that, and that. So A, E, and C. And now the difference between C major and A minor is just one note.
Yeah, and that's a very good explanation. That is exactly why you use inversions, to move around as little as possible. This is still music theory.
So let's go, I'm C to A minor. Now I want to play a G and I want to have minimal movement. It wouldn't make sense for me to play a G all the way up here because I'm moving my hand a lot. So if I'm on an A minor, I might want to play a G like this. So I'm taking my A minor shape, which is pinky, index, and thumb, and just moving it down one. And now I've got a G major chord.
Once again, this is something that's done by practice, so the more you play and the more you come across these certain types of chords, the more you'll remember them. If you play a C major chord in first inversion in several songs, you'll soon start to remember what a C major first inversion feels like and looks like on the piano.
And I'm going to show you, putting all of this together, what this ultimately looks like. Well, I found a love for A minor inversion, darling, just F inversion, and follow my G inversion. I found a C normal, beautiful A minor inversion. Now I'm an F inverted, now going to a G inverted, because we were just kids.
So it's an interesting video. The big problem is trying to simplify things down so that it appeals to the most people, but at the same time explaining something without giving the information.
We're going to ignore music theory for now and just focus on the things you actually have to know. We're going to randomly spam those notes in a way that sounds reasonably aesthetic.
Rather than trying to learn chords so that you can play any song in only the key of C major and by only copying chords on an ultimate guitar, you're much better off just learning why. How can you play this same piece in a different key so it fits your voice range much better? Why are some chords major and some chords minor? How do you make it sound much bigger in the chorus compared to the verse? How do you add other notes that aren't in the chords into the piece of music? How could you make it sound more jazzy, or how could you turn it into a classical sounding piece? All of these things can be answered just by understanding little bits of knowledge and just by practicing things in a more step-by-step fashion. So I don't think Ali's video is the optimal way of learning the piano, but I do think he's a great content creator. If you want to see my reaction to someone's 1 year of piano progress, then check out this video and I will see you there.